Oh, hello. Let me go grab Maestro and Snocking, so I'll switch over to, let's see, was it this one? Yeah, it's this one. I'll be right back. Snockings might be tricky to get at the moment because she's been going into her scratching post a lot lately, and she is getting very grumpy about being disturbed while she's in there. So I'll wait until she comes out and starts investigating. But I'll be right back with Maestro. I will definitely do that. But here is my grumpy big boy. All right, all right. Ooh, we might get some Maestro screen time. Fancy. Pants. Turn around. Oh, sure, okay. He's playing it like that. He thinks it's more fun to steal from it than to eat it in a regular way. When he gets tired with food, he'll sort of do the whole reaching into the bowl and snagging a piece out and then flipping it onto the floor, because stolen things taste better, apparently. That was it. You just swallowed those. Anyways, that is from Corel. Oh, sorry about this. How have you been, Corel? How was your week? There we go. There it is. Got my book right here. We will probably run over today because we have that much left of the book. It looks almost half. We'll see how far we are when we get to 4 o'clock. So, yeah. Sorry. Cat fur gets everywhere. Apparently in your eye, too. Yay. Yeah, as normal. Well, I'm sorry that it's blah. I always wish for, for better for you. I kind of like doing the little bit of can ASMR at the beginning of the stream, just in case Kicken's around, because I know that Kicken likes Red Bull as well. It's such a great drink. Who would have thought that it would be a great drink to, to drink when you're like singing or reading or something like that? Just the right amount of sweetness, just the right amount of like the tiniest hints of carbonation, so it's not going to kill your throat. Shall we begin? So let us hide Maestro here. Oh yeah, and just a reminder, next week I'm starting the new schedule where it's going to be Friday and Saturday. And oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys, I decided on a book. It looks like it could be fun. It's by Virginia Woolf, and that's called Orlando, and it is this person, lack of a better term, this person who lives throughout, they're kind of immortal, I guess, and so, they live throughout many different eras and ages, and just sort of a farcical look on the world and society, and it looks like it could fit in really well with Pride Month, because at one point Orlando wakes up and they are no longer a man, they are a woman, and they're like, oh, Okay, wasn't expecting that. We'll see how this goes. I've never read it, but it looks like it could be fun. So I just need to remember to buy it at work. It's on hold waiting for me. Goodness. I was brushing Maestro earlier this week. He has so much dandruff. More dandruff than I have seen on a person. Well, I mean, because there's more surface for fur/hair to be on. But this is his, I recently cleaned it out, his hairbrush. He does not like being brushed with a cat hair brush. So, yeah. I did, yeah. This is kind of a weird weekend because I'm actually working tomorrow. I don't usually work on Saturdays anymore, since I kind of became a manager. I don't know, I kind of have some of the responsibilities of a manager. It was weird because one of my coworkers referred to me as a manager. Oh, it was really, really sweet. A guy called up our store and he said that he was from the Teachers Association, which is kind of like a county-wide PTA, and they wanted to give the teachers a little extra something special and nice to thank them for dealing with this really weird school year that they just ended. And he asked each of the teachers to request where they would like a local business where they would like to get a $25 gift certificate from, and 25 of the teachers said at our bookstore. So he was calling up to arrange that, and I thought it was super sweet. So yeah, we have a really great community where I live. Like, a lot of them are thinking we got to support our neighbors, and there's so many people who read. So, we've been kept very busy, even after, people are ending their quarantines and stuff. But even like when we were in quarantine, about a little over a year ago, we had shut the store down, or not shut the store down, but, we had it so that people couldn't come into the store, but we were able to continue business operations since we were deemed essential, because the schools didn't quite know what they were doing yet, and the parents were kind of tearing their hair out because their little rugrats were running around at home with nothing to do. So they're like, bookstore, educational material. And you're like, yes, we do have workbooks. Yes, we have a lot of reading for your guys to do. So we were able to do that. And at least one or two people every single day, when they were calling up and doing business over the phone, they're like, our first thought was, we have to make sure that the bookstore is still around. So it's been super awesome. Yeah, anyways, that was kind of a tangent. But yeah, anyways, he said, yes, my manager is at the back. I can pass her on to you. And I'm thinking, what? I'm a manager? I guess that makes sense. I mean, I've been there for 17 years, so... I mean, by any other person's definition, since I'm in charge 3 days of the week, and I'm sending all the orders, receiving all the orders, all of that stuff, I guess you could say I am. Just weird to hear somebody refer to me as that. Anyways, hey Mikey, how are you doing? Oh, thank you for the hydrate reminder. I was just going off on a bit of a tangent about the bookstore where I work. I work at an independent bookstore in California. How have you been doing? How has your weekend been? I haven't started reading, so you haven't really missed anything. Sorry, Maestro's fur got everywhere. So, Mikey, if you haven't seen any of the VODs for this story time, I am reading these short stories by Sui Sin Far, who is actually a pen name for Edith Maud Eaton, who about 100, no, more than 100 years ago, she died in 1914. Was just, sorry, I was getting distracted. Writes a whole bunch of short stories about life as a Chinese American living in Seattle. And like, some of them have been really cute, some of them have been rough. But yeah, I've been enjoying it so far. I hope you have too, girl. But we'll go ahead and get started. Let's hide Maestro here. Whenever you see him going away, disappearing, that means that I'm reading. So come on. There we go. All right. In the land of the tree. In the land of the breeze. Sorry. Tree. Chapter 1. See, little one, the hills in the morning sun. There is thy home for years to come. It is very beautiful, and thou wilt be very happy there. The little one looked up into his mother's face in perfect faith. He was engaged in pleasant occupation of sucking a sweetmeat, but that did not prevent him from gurgling responsively. Yes, my olive bud, there is where thy father is making a fortune for thee. Thy father! Oh, wilt thou not be glad to behold his dear face? 'Twas for thee I left him. The little one ducked his chin sympathetically against his mother's knee. She lifted him into her lap. He was 2 years old, a round, dimple-cheeked boy with bright brown eyes and a sturdy little frame. He puffed up, mocking a tugboat steaming by. San Francisco's waterfront was lined with ships and steamers, while other craft, large and small, including a couple of white transports from the Philippines, lay at anchor here and there offshore. It was some time before the Eastern Queen could get docked, and even after that was accomplished, a lone Chinaman who had been waiting on the wharf for an hour was detained that much longer by men with the initials USC on their caps before he could board the steamer and welcome his wife and child. By the way, I forgot to mention for anybody new listening, even though the author's real name is Edith Maud Eaton, she is half Chinese, half English. She was born in England. Her mother was an acrobat who worked in, or was sort of a slave performer in a traveling circus from China, and her father saved her from slavery and married her, and then they moved to Canada, and then eventually on to America. Of course, Canada's in America, sorry, United States, that's what I meant. My bad. Sorry, swags. Okay. This is thy son, announced the happy Lai Chu. Hom Hing lifted the child, felt of his little body and limbs, gazed into his face with proud and joyous eyes, then turned inquiringly to a customs officer at his side. "That's a fine boy you have there," said the man. "Where was he born?" "In China," answered Hom Hing, swinging the little one on his right shoulder, preparatory to leading his wife off the steamer. "Ever been to America before?" "No, not he," answered the father with a happy laugh. The customs officer beckoned to another. "This little fellow, said he, "is visiting America for the first time." The other customs officer stroked his chin reflectively. "Good day," said Hom Hing. "Wait," commanded one of the officers. "You cannot go just yet." "What more now?" asked Hom Hing. "I'm afraid," said the first customs officer, "that we cannot allow the boy to go ashore. There is nothing in the papers that you have shown us, your wife's papers and your own, having been bearing upon the child, any bearing upon the child." "There was no child when the papers were made out," returned Hom Hing. He spoke calmly, but there was apprehension in his eyes and in his tightening grip on his son. "What is it? What is it?" quavered Lai Cho, who understood a little English. The second customs officer regarded her pityingly. I don't like this part of the business, he muttered. The first officer turned to Hom Hing, and in an official tone of voice said, "Seeing that the boy has no certificate entitling him to admission to this country, you will have to leave him with us." "Leave my boy!" exclaimed Hom Hing. "Yes, he will be well taken care of, and just as soon as we can hear from Washington, he will be handed over to you." "But," protested Hom Hing, "he's my son." "We have no proof," answered the man with a shrug of his shoulders, "and even if so, we cannot let him pass without orders from the government." "He's my son," reiterated Hom Hing, slowly and solemnly. "I am a Chinese merchant, and have been in business in San Francisco for many years. When my wife told me one morning that she dreamed of a green tree with spreading branches and one beautiful red flower growing thereon, I answered her that I wished my son to be born in our country and for her to prepare to go to China. My wife complied with my wish. After my son was born, my mother fell sick, and my wife nursed and cared for her. Then my father, too, fell sick, and my wife also nursed and cared for him. For 20 moons my wife cared for and nursed the old people, and when they died, they bless her and my son, and I send for her return to me. For her to return to me. I had no fear of trouble. I was a Chinese merchant, and my son was my son." "Very good, Hom Hing," replied the first officer. "Nevertheless, we take your son." "No, you not take him. He my son." It was Lai Chu, snatching the child from his father's arms. Snatching the child from his father's arms, she held and covered him with her own. The officers conferred together for a few moments. Then one drew Hom Hing aside and spoke in his ear. Resignedly, Hom Hing bowed his head and then approached his wife. "'Tis the law," said he, speaking in Chinese, "and 'twill be but for a little while until tomorrow's sunrise." "You too?" reproached Lai Chu in a voice eloquent with pain. But accustomed to obedience, she yielded the boy to her husband, who in turn delivered him to the first officer. The little one protested lustily against the transfer, but his mother covered her face with her sleeve, and his father silently led her away. Thus was the law of the land complied with. Chapter 2. Day was breaking. Lai Chu, who had been awake all night, dressed herself, but then awoke her husband. "'Tis the morn," she cried. "Go, bring our son." The man rubbed his eyes and arose upon his elbows so that he could see out of the window. A pale star was visible in the sky. The petals of a lily and a bull on the window-sill were unfurled. "'Tis not yet time," said he, laying his head down again. "Not yet time? The time that I lived before yesterday is not so much as the time that has been since my little one was taken from me." The mother threw herself down beside the bed and covered her face. Hom Hing turned on the light, and touching his wife's bowed head with a sympathetic hand, inquired if she had slept. "Slept!" she echoed weepingly. "Oh, how could I close my eyes with my arms empty of the little body that has filled them every night for more than 20 moons? You do not know, man, what it is to miss the feel of the little fingers and the little toes and the soft round limbs of your little one. Even in the darkness his darling eyes used to shine up to me, and often have I fallen into slumber with his pretty babble in my ears. And now I see him not, I touch him not, I hear him not. My baby, my little fat one." Now, consoled Hom Hing, patting his wife's shoulder reassuringly. "There is no need to grieve so. He will soon gladden you again. There cannot be any law that would keep a child from its mother." Lai Chu dried her tears. "You are right, my husband," she meekly murmured. She arose and stepped out the apartment, setting things to rights. The box of presents she had brought for her California friends had been opened the evening before. The silks, embroideries, carved ivories, ornamental lacquerware, brasses, camphor wood boxes, fans, and chinaware were scattered around in confused heaps. In the midst of unpacking, the thought of her child and... I did read that right. In the midst of unpacking, the thought of her child in the hands of strangers had overpowered her, and she had left everything to crawl into bed and weep. Having arranged her gifts in order, she stepped out onto the deep balcony. The star had faded from view, and there were bright streaks in the western sky. Lai Chu looked down the street and around. Beneath a flat occupied by her and her husband were quarters for a number of bachelor Chinamen, and she could hear from them where she stood, taking their early morning breakfast. Below their dining room was her husband's grocery store. Across the way was a large restaurant. Last night it had been resplendent with gay-colored lanterns and the sound of music. The rejoicings over the completion of the moon by Kwon Sum's firstborn had been long and loud, and had caused her to tie a handkerchief over her ears. She, a bereaved mother, had it not in her heart to rejoice with other parents. This morning the place was more in accord with her mood. It was still and quiet. The revelers had dispersed or were asleep. A roly-poly woman in black sateen with long pendant earrings in her ears looked up from the street below and waved her a smiling greeting. It was her old neighbor, Kui-hoi. Sure. Kui-hoi. I figured it out and then I stumbled again. The wife of the golden bosser, Mark Singh. With her was a little boy in yellow jacket and lavender pantaloons. Lai Chu remembered him as a baby. She used to like to play with him in those days when she had no child of her own. What a long time ago that had seemed. She caught her breath in a sigh and laughed instead. "Why are you so merry?" called her husband from within. "Because my little one is coming home," answered Lai Chu. "I am a happy mother, a happy mother." She pattered into the room with a smile on her face. The noon hour had arrived. Rice was steaming in the bowls, and a fragrant dish of chicken and bamboo shoots was awaiting Hom Hing. Not for one moment had Lai Chu paused to rest during the morning hours. Her activity had been ceaseless. Every now and then, again, however, she had raised her eyes to the gilded clock on the curiously carved mantelpiece. Once she had exclaimed, "Why so long? Oh, why so long?" Then, apostrophizing herself, "Lai Chu, be happy. The little one is coming, the little one is coming." Several times she burst into tears, and several times she laughed aloud. Hom Hing entered the room. His arms hung down by his sides. "The little one!" shrieked Lai Chu. "They bid me call tomorrow." With a moan, the mother sank to the floor. The noon hour passed. The dinner remained on the table. Chapter 3. The winter rains were over. Spring had come to California, flushing the hills with green and causing an ever-changing pageant of flowers to pass over them. But there was no spring in Lai Chu's heart, for the little one remained away from her arms. He was being kept in a mission. White women were caring for him, and though for one full moon he had pined for his mother and refused to be comforted, he was now apparently happy and contented. 5 moons, or 5 months, had gone by since the day he had passed with Lai Chu through the Golden Gate, but the great government at Washington still delayed sending the answer which would return him to his parents. Hom Hing was disconsolately rolling up and down the balls in his abacus box when a keen-faced young man stepped into his store. "What news?" asked the Chinese merchant. "This." The young man brought forth a typewritten letter. Hom Hing read the words. "Chinese child, alleged to be the son of Hom Hing Chinese merchant doing business at 425 Clay Street, San Francisco." Same will have attention as soon as possible. Hom Hing returned the letter, and without a word continued his manipulation of the counting machine. Have you anything to say? Asked the young man. Nothing. They have sent the same letter 15 times before. Have you not yourself showed it to me? True. The young man eyed the Chinese merchant furtively. He had a proposition to make, and he was pondering whether or not the time was appropriate. How's your wife? He inquired solicitously and diplomatically. Hom Hing shook his head mournfully. She seems less every day, he replied. Her food she takes only when I bid her, and her tears fall continually. She finds no pleasure in dress or flowers, and cares not to see her friends. Her eyes stare all night. I think before another moon she will pass into the land of spirits. No! Exclaimed the young man, genuinely startled. If the boy not come home, I lose my wife, sure, continued Hom Hing with bitter sadness. It's not right, cried the young man indignantly. Then he made his proposition. The Chinese father's eyes brightened exceedingly. Will I like you to go to Washington and make them give you the paper to restore my son? Cried he. How can you ask when you know my heart's desire? Then, said the young fellow, I will start next week. I'm anxious to see this thing through, if only for the sake of your wife's peace of mind. I will call her. To hear what you think to do will make her glad, said Hom Hing. He called a message to Lai Chu upstairs through a tube in the wall. In a few moments she appeared, listless, wan, and hollow-eyed, but when her husband told her the young lawyer's suggestion, she became as one electrified. Her form straightened, her eyes glistened, the color flushed to her cheeks. Oh, she cried, turning to James Clancy. You are a husband, you are 100-man good. Yeah, you are 100-man good. There we go. The young man felt somewhat embarrassed. His eyes shifted a little under the intense gaze of the Chinese mother. Well, we must get your boy for you, he responded. Of course, turning to Hom Hing, it will cost a little money. You can't get fellows to hurry the government for you without gold in your pocket. Hom Hing stared blankly for a moment. Then, how much do you want, Mr. Clancy? He asked quietly. Well, I will need at least 500 to start with. Hom Hing cleared his throat. I think I told you the time I last paid you for writing letters for me and seeing the custom boss here, that nearly all I had was gone. Oh, well, then we won't talk about it, old fellow. It won't harm the boy to stay where he is, and your wife may get over it all right. Well, what that you say? Quavered Lai Chu. James Clancy looked out of the window. He says, explained Hom Hing in English, that to get our boy, we have to have much money. Money? Oh, yes. Lai Chu nodded her head. I have not got the money to give him. For a moment Lai Chu gazed wonderingly from one face to the other. Then, comprehension dawning on her, with swift anger pointing to the lawyer, she cried, You not 100-man good, you just common white man. Yes, ma'am, returned James Clancy, bowing and smiling ironically. Hom Hing pushed his wife behind him and addressed the lawyer again. I might try, said he, to raise something, but 500, it is not possible. What about 4? I tell you I have next to nothing left, and my friends are not rich. Very well. The lawyer moved leisurely toward the door, pausing on its threshold to light a cigarette. Stop, white man! White man, stop! Lai Chu, panting and terrified, had started forward and now stood beside him, clutching his sleeve excitedly. You say you can go to get paper to bring my little boy to me if Hom Hing give you $500? The lawyer nodded carelessly. His eyes were intent upon the cigarette, which would not take the fire from the match. Then you go get paper. If Hom Hing not can give you $500, I give you perhaps that much, what What much that... Ah, I give you perhaps what more that much. He slipped a heavy gold bracelet. She slipped a heavy gold bracelet from her wrist and held it out to the man. Mechanically, he took it. I go get more. She hurried away, disappearing behind the door through which she had come. Oh, look here, I can't accept this, said James Clancy, walking back to Hom Hing and laying down the bracelet before him. It's all right. And, sorry. It's all right, said Hom Hing seriously. Pure China gold. My wife's parents give it to her when we married. But I can't take it anyway, protested the young man. It is all same as money, and you want money to go to Washington, replied Hom Hing in a matter-of-fact manner. See, my jade earrings, my gold buttons, my hairpins, my comb of pearl, and my rings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rings. Very good, very good. All same much money. I give them all to you. You take and bring me paper for my little one. Lai Chu piled up her jewels before the lawyer. Hom Hing laid a restraining hand upon her shoulder. Not all, my wife, he said in Chinese. He selected a ring, his gift to Lai Chu when she dreamed of the tree with the red flower. The rest of the jewels he pushed toward the white man. Take them and sell them, said he. They will pay your fare to Washington and bring you back with the paper. For one moment, James Clancy hesitated. He was not a sentimental man, but something within him arose against accepting such payment for his services. They're good, pleadingly asserted Lai Chu, seeing his hesitation. Whereupon he seized the jewels, thrust them into his coat pocket, and walked rapidly away from the store. Chapter 4. Lai Chu followed after the missionary woman through the mission's nursery school. Her heart was beating so high with happiness that she could scarcely breathe. The paper had come at last, the precious paper which gave Hom Hing and his wife the right to the possession of their own child. It was 10 months now since he had been taken from them. 10 months since the sun had ceased to shine for Lai Chu. The room was filled with children, most of them wee tots, but none so wee as her own. The mission woman talked as she walked. She told Lai Chu that little Kim, as he had been named by the school, was the pet of the place, and that his little tricks and ways amused and delighted everyone. He had been rather difficult to manage at first, and had cried much for his mother. But children so soon forget, and after a month he seemed quite at home, and played round as bright and happy as a bird. Yes, responded Lai Chu. Oh, yes, yes. But she did not hear what was said to her. She was walking in a maze of anticipatory joy. Wait here, please, said the woman, placing Lai Chu in a chair. The very youngest ones are having their breakfast. She withdrew for a moment. It seemed like an hour to the mother. Then she reappeared, leading by the hand a little boy dressed in blue cotton overalls and white-soled shoes. The little boy's face was round and dimpled, and his eyes were very bright. Little one, oh, my little one, cried Lai Chu. She fell on her knees and stretched her hungry arms towards her son. But the little one shrunk from her and tried to hide himself in the folds of the white woman's skirt. Go away, he bid his mother. Bid, not bit. And that's the end of that story. Woof. It kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you ever read The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver, but there is a couple of in that story that has come from Latin America, and they're trying to gain entrance, and I think they have a child, something like that. I'm not really sure. And so there is this very intense moment in the book where they are trying to persuade their way in, because they did not come there legally, but they were escaping some horrible things. And so, yeah, it's a good book. I really liked that book. And it's just a great story about, like, the people, like the family that you make for yourself and people supporting each other. Yeah, it's a good book. Anyways, on to the next story. The Chinese Lily. Mermaid lived in an upstairs room of a Chinatown dwelling house. There were other little Chinese women living in the same floor, but Mermaid never went amongst them. She was not as they were. She was a cripple. A fall had twisted her legs so that she moved around with difficulty and scarred her face so terribly that none save Lin John cared to look upon it. Lin John, her brother, was a laundryman working for another of his countrymen. Lin John and Mermaid had come to San Francisco with their parents when they were small children. Their mother had died the day she entered the foreign city, and the father the week following, both having contracted a fever on the steamer. Mermaid and Lin John were then taken in charge by their father's brother, and although he was a poor man, he did his best for them until called away by death. Long before her uncle died, Mermaid had met with the accident that had made her not as other girls, but that had only strengthened her brother's affection, and old Lin Wan died happy in the knowledge that Lin John would never put Mermaid before himself. Would ever put Mermaid before himself. So Mermaid lived in her little upstairs room, cared for by Lin John, and scarcely any evening passed that he did not call to see her. One evening, however, Lin John failed to appear, and Mermaid began to feel very sad and lonely. Mermaid could embroider Mermaid could embroider all day in contented silence if she knew that in the evening someone would come to whom she could communicate all the thoughts that filled a small black head that knew nothing of life save what it saw from an upstairs window. Mermaid's window looked down upon the street, and she would sit for hours, pressed close against it, watching those who passed below and all that took place. That day she had seen many things which she had put into her mental portfolio for Lin John's edification when evening should come. 2 yellow-robed priests had passed below on their way to the Joss house in the next street. A little bird with a white breast had fluttered against the window pane. A man carrying an image of a gambling cash tiger had entered the house across the street, and 6 young girls of about her own age, dressed gaily as if to attend a wedding, had also passed over the same threshold. But when 9 o'clock came and no Lin John, the girl began to cry softly. She did not often shed tears, but for some reason, unknown to Mermaid herself, the sight of those joyous girls caused sad reflections. In the midst of her weeping, a timid knock was heard. It was not Lin John. He always gave a loud rap, then entered without waiting to be bidden. Mermaid hobbled to the door, pulled it open, and there, in the dim light of the hall without, beheld a young girl. The most beautiful young girl that Mermaid had ever seen, and she stood there extending to Mermaid a blossom from a Chinese lily plant. Mermaid understood the meaning of the offered flower, and accepting it, beckoned for her visitor to follow her into her room. What a delightful hour that was to Mermaid! She forgot that she was scarred and crippled, and she and the young girl chattered out their little hearts to one another. Lin John is dear, but one can't talk to a man, even if he is a brother, as one can to one the same as oneself, said Mermaid to Sinfar, her new friend, and Sinfar, the meaning of whose name was Pure Flower, or Chinese Lily, in answered. Oh, Sui Sinfar. I guess she put herself into the story, or this is her fictionalized self. Yes, indeed. Women must be the friend of a woman, and the man the friend of the man. It is not so in the country that heaven loves. Is it not so in the country that heaven loves? What beneficent spirit moved you to come to my door? Asked Mermaid. I know not, replied Sinfar, save that I was lonely. We have but lately moved here, my sister's husband, and myself. My sister is a bride, and there is much to say between her and her husband. Therefore, in the evening, when the day's duties are done, I am alone. Several times, hearing that you were sick, I ventured to your door, but failed to knock, because always when I drew near I heard the voice of him whom they call your brother. Tonight, as I returned from an errand for my sister, I heard only the sound of weeping, so I hastened to my room and plucked the lily for you. The next evening, when Lin John explained how he had been obliged to work the evening before, Mermaid answered brightly that it was all right. She loved him just as much as ever, and was just as glad to see him as ever, but if work prevented him from calling, he was not to worry. She had found a friend who would share her loneliness. Lin John was surprised, but glad to hear such news, and it came to pass that when he beheld Sinfar, her sweet and gentle face, her pretty drooped eyelids and arched eyebrows, he began to think of apple and peach and plum trees, showering their dainty blossoms in the country that heaven loves. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Lin John worked in his laundry, paid little attention to the street uproar and the clang of the engines rushing by. He had no thought of what it meant to him, and would have continued at his work undisturbed, had not a boy put his head into the door and shouted, "Lin John! The house in which your sister lives is on fire!" The tall building was in flames when Lin John reached it, the uprising tongues licking his face as he swung up the ladder no other man dared descend. "I will not go. It is best for me to die," said Mermaid, resisted her friend with all her puny strength. "The ladder will not bear the weight of both of us. You are his sister," calmly replied Sinfar. "But he loves you best. You and he can be happy together. I'm not fit to live." "May Lin John decide, Mermaid?" "Yes, Lin John may decide." Then John reached the casement. For one awful second he wavered. Then his eyes sought the eyes of his sister's friend. "Come, Mermaid," he called. "Where is Sinfar?" asked Mermaid when she became conscious. "Sinfar is in the land of happy spirits, and I am still in this sad, dark world. Speak not so, little one. Your brother loves you and will protect you from the darkness." "But you loved Sinfar better, and she loved you." Lin John bowed his head. "Alas," wept Mermaid, "that I should live to make others sad." "Nay," said Lin John, "Sinfar is happy, and I did my duty with her approval, to her bidding. How then, little sister, can I be sad?" Such melancholy stories this time round. I hope we have some nicer ones coming up. The Smuggling of Taiko, or Tieko. Amongst the daring men who engage in contrabanding Chinese from Canada into the United States, Jack Fabian ranks as the boldest indeed, the cleverest in scheming, and the most successful in outwitting government officials. Uncommonly strong in person, tall and well-built, with fine features and a pair of keen, steady blue eyes, gifted with a sort of rough eloquence and of much personal fascination, it is no wonder that we fellows regard him as our chief and are bound to follow where he leads. With Fabian at our head, we engage in the wildest adventures and find such places of concealment for our human goods as none but those who take part in a desperate business would dare to dream of. Seems kind of like a Scarlet Pimpernel-esque character. Jack, however, is not in search of glory. Money is his object. One day, when a romantic friend remarked that it was very kind of him to help the poor Chinaman over the border, a cynical smile curled his mustache. "Kind?" he echoed. While I haven't yet had much to become sentimental over the matter, it is merely a matter of dollars and cents, though, of course, to a man of my strict principles, there is a certain pleasure to be derived from getting ahead of the government. Poor devil does now and then like to take a little out of those millionaires' concerns. It was last summer, and Fabian was somewhat down on his luck. A few months previously, to the surprise of us all, he had made a blunder, which resulted in his capture by American officers, and he and his companion, together with 5 unaccustomed Chinamen, had been lodged in a county jail to await trial. But loafing behind bars did not agree with Fabian's energetic nature. But at this time, there was a law against people from China coming into the country, like immigrating over. So I guess they would go over to Canada, which was, welcoming them, and then they would try to smuggle themselves over. But loafing behind bars did not agree with Fabian's energetic nature, so one dark night, by means of a saw which had been given to him by a very innocent-looking visitor the day before, he made good his escape, and after a long, hungry, detective-hunted tramp through woods and bushes, found himself safe in Canada. He had had a 3-month sojourn in prison, and during that time some changes had taken place in smuggling circles. Some ingenious lawyers had devised a scheme by which any young Chinaman, on payment of a couple of $100, could produce a father, which father would swear the young Chinaman was born in America, thus proving him to be an American citizen with the right to breathe United States air. And the Chinese themselves, assisted by some white men, were manufacturing certificates establishing their right to cross the border, and in that way crossing over in large batches. That sort of trick naturally spoiled our fellow's business, but we all know that Yankee Sharper game can hold good only for a short while, so we bided our time and waited in patience. Not so Fabian. He became very restless and wandered around with glowering looks. He was sitting one day in a laundry, the proprietor of which had sent out many a boy through our chief's instrumentality. Indeed, Fabian is said to have rushed over to Uncle Sam himself some 500 celestials, and if Fabian had not been an exceedingly generous fellow, he might now be a gentleman of leisure instead of an unimmortalized Rob Roy. Well, Fabian was sitting in the laundry of Chen Ting Lung and Co., telling a nice-looking young Chinaman that he was so broke that he'd be willing to take over even one man at a time. The young Chinaman looked thoughtfully into Fabian's face. "Do you take me?" he inquired. "Take you?" echoed Fabian. "Why, you're one of the bosses here. You don't mean to say that you are hankering after a place where it would take you years to get as high up in the washy-washy business as you are now?" "Yes, I want to go," answered Tieko. "I want to go to New York, and I will pay you $50 and all expense if you take me, and not say you take me to my parents." "There's no accounting for a Chinaman," muttered Fabian, but he gladly agreed to the proposal, and a night was fixed. "What is the name of the firm you are going to?" inquired the white man. "Chinamen who intend being smuggled always make arrangements with some Chinese firm in the States to receive them." Tieko hesitated, then mumbled something which sounded like Kwong Wo Yuan or Long Lo Tun. Fabian was not sure which, but did not repeat the question, not being sufficiently interested. I'm going to take a quick break because Snockings is here. So hold on a moment. Snockings. Hey, Bethel. Snockings, come on. Come on up. Yeah, come on up. It's treats time. This is from Corel. Get a better look at her face. You got it all? You got it all. There you go. Gotta lick it clean. I'm glad that they haven't gotten sick of these treats. It's actually regular cat food, but it's extra fishy smelling, and they love the fishy stuff. Not so much into the fowls. So yes, Snockings appreciates that, Corel. We're going to be here for a while. Once she gets started licking, she never stops. She likes to lick my nose. Maestro, on the other hand, yeah. Maestro, on the other hand, likes to give me little licks right on my forehead. I'm not sure if it's just he likes to lick there or if he's trying to emulate a kiss or something like that, because I kiss him on the head a lot. Are you gonna just hang out here? I mean, I can read with you in my arms. How is it? We'll get more next time. Oh, thank you for the hydration reminder. My lovely tea. This is not yours. Okay. Now we'll continue. Sorry about the little break there in the middle of the chapter. And we will hide Maestro again. Alright. Now I have to find where we were. He left the laundry, nodding goodbye to Tieko as he passed outside the window, and the Chinaman nodded back, a faint smile on his small, delicate face, lingering until Fabian's receding form was lost to view. It was a pleasant night on which the two men set out. Fabian had a rig waiting at the corner of the street. Tieko, dressed in citizen's clothes, stepped into it unobserved, and the smuggler and would-be smuggled were soon out of the city. I'm guessing it would be Taiko, because they usually have like the one-syllable names. So we'll go with Taiko. And the smuggler and would-be smuggled were soon out of the city. They had a merry drive, for Fabian's liking for Taiko was very real. He had known him for several years, and the lad's quick intelligence interested him. The second day they left their horse at a farmhouse where Fabian would call for it on his return trip, crossed a river in a rowboat before the sun was up, and plunged into a wood in which they would remain till evening. It was raining, but through mud and wind and rain, they trudged slowly and heavily. Taiko paused now and then to take breath. Once Fabian remarked, "You are not a very strong lad, Taiko. It's a pity you have to work as you do for a living." And Taiko had answered, "Work very good. No work, Taiko die." Fabian looked at the lad protectingly, wondering in a careless way why this Chinaman seemed to him so different from the others. "Wouldn't you like to go back to China? In China?" he asked. "No," said Taiko decidedly. "Why?" "I don't know why," answered Taiko. Fabian laughed. "Haven't you got a nice little wife at home?" he continued. "I hear you people marry very young." "No, I no wife," asserted his companion with a choky little laugh. "I never have no wife." "Nonsense," joked Fabian. "Why, Taiko, think how nice it would be to have a little woman cook your rice and to love you." "I have no wife," repeated Taiko seriously. "I not like woman, I like man." "You confirmed old bachelor," ejaculated Fabian. "I like you," said Tycho, his boyish voice sounding clear and sweet in the wet woods. I like you so much that I want to go to New York, so you make $50. And a friend in New York. What? Exclaimed Fabian. Oh, I'm sorry to tell you, Tycho, very sorry, said the Chinese boy, and the Chinese boy shuffled on with bowed head. Look here, Tycho, said Fabian. I won't have you do this for my sake. You've been very foolish, and I don't care for your $50. I do not need to have as much as you do. Good God, how ashamed you make me feel. I, who've blown in my thousands in idle pleasures, cannot take the little you have slaved for. We are in New York State now. When we get out of these woods, we will have to walk over a bridge which crosses a river. On the other side, not far from where we cross, there is a railway station. Instead of buying you a ticket for the city of New York, I shall take a train with you for Toronto. Tycho did not answer. He seemed to be thinking deeply. Suddenly he pointed to where some fallen trees lay. Two men run away behind these, he cried. Fabian looked round them anxiously. His keen eyes seemed to pierce the gloom in his endeavor to catch a glimpse of any person. But no man was visible, and, save the dismal sighing of the wind among the trees, all was quiet. There's no one, he said somewhat gruffly. He was rather startled, for they were a mile over the border, and he knew that the government officers were in a sharp lookout for him, and felt, despite his strength, if any trick or surprise were attempted, it would go hard with him. If they catch you with me, it'd be too bad. Sententiously. Yeah, that's a word. I'll have to look it up later. Sententiously remarked Tycho. It seemed as if his words were in answer to Fabian's thoughts. But they will not catch us, so cheer up your heart, my boy, replied the latter more heartily than he felt. If they come, I'm not with you. They not take you, and it be all light. Yes, assented Fabian, wondering what his companion was thinking about. It's supposed to be all right, but she's mixing the R's and the L's, which I have not been reading it that way. They emerged from the woods in the dusk of the evening and were soon on the bridge crossing the river. When they were near the center, Tycho stopped and looked into Fabian's face. Man come for you. I not here. Man no hurt you. And with the words he whirled like a flash over the rail. In another flash Fabian was after him, but though a first-class swimmer, the white man's efforts were of no avail, and Tycho was borne away with him by the swift current. Cold and dripping wet, Fabian dragged himself up the bank and found himself a prisoner. So, your Chinaman threw himself into the river. What was that for? Asked one of the government officials. I think he was out of his head, replied Fabian, and he fully believed what he uttered. We tracked you out through the woods, said another of the captors. We thought once the boy caught sight of us. Fabian remained silent. Tycho's body was picked up the next day. Tycho's body, and yet not Tycho, for Tycho was a youth, and the body found with Tycho's face and dressed in Tycho's clothes was the body of a girl, a woman. Nobody in the laundry of Chen Ting Lung and Co., no Chinaman in Canada or New York, could explain the mystery. Tycho had come out to Canada with a number of other youths. Though not very strong, he had always been a good worker and very smart. He had been quiet and reserved among his own countrymen, had refused to smoke tobacco or opium, and had been a regular attendant at Sunday schools and a great favorite with mission ladies. Fabian was released in less than a week. No evidence against him, said the commissioner, who was not aware that the prisoner was the man who had broken out of jail but a month before. Fabian is now very busy. There are lots of boys taking his helping hand over the border, but none of them are like Tycho. And sometimes, between whiles, Fabian finds himself pondering long and earnestly over the mystery of Tycho's life and death. I had thought for a second that we might get a queer story, but it was a bit different than that. There's actually, let me put him back in. There's a little graphic novel that came out, and I think they made it into an animated, not an animated short. It was a short cartoon, but it wasn't like short. It's called The Breadwinner, and I don't remember in which Middle Eastern country it took place, but it was like a couple years after the country in which it takes place had switched over to different hands. The power had switched. And so it had been a place where women could be educated, and then turned into a place where it was illegal for women to be educated, and women were not allowed to work, and all of that stuff. And so the main character is a girl who lives there, and I don't remember her name. And her father, who had taught her to read and write and, taught her a lot of other things, and would also talk to her about freedom and equal rights and stuff like that. He had been arrested because, he educated women, and he talked about, freedoms and stuff like that. And the only male remaining in the family was an infant. The women were not allowed to work. They had no male relatives, and so they had to, they were starving. They couldn't leave the house. So the girl decided that she would become a boy. And so she cut her hair very short, and she wore boys' clothes, and she went out and found work. And, that was the only way that they could live. And it's called The Breadwinner. So if you have a chance to look it up, either the graphic novel or the cartoon, like little animated short movie, I'd say look it up. I should read it again. It was good. But it was, came out maybe 2-3 years ago, something like that. Anyways, continuing on. It just reminded me of that because, some people had to do that. They had to dress as a different gender just to survive. All right. The God of Restoration. He that hath wine hath many friends, muttered Koan Lo the second, as he glanced backwards into the store out of which he was stepping. It was a Chinese general store, well stocked with all manner of quaint wares, and about a dozen Chinamen were sitting round, whilst in an adjoining room could be seen the recumbent forms of several smokers who were discussing business and indulging in the fascinating pipe during the intervals of conversation. Noticeable amongst the smokers was Koan Lo the first, a tall, middle-aged Chinaman wearing a black cap with a red button. Koan Lo the first was cousin to Koan Lo the second, but whereas Koan Lo the second was young and penniless, Koan Lo the first was one of the wealthiest Chinese merchants in San Francisco, and a mighty man amongst the people of his name in that city, who regarded him as a father. Koan Lo the second had been instructed by Koan Lo the first to meet Xie, the latter's bride, who was arriving that day by steamer from China. Koan Lo the first was too busy a man to go down himself to the docks, so Koan Lo the second and Xie met, though not for the first time. 5 years before, in a suburb of Canton City, they had said to one another, "I love you." Koan Lo the second was an orphan, and had been educated and cared for from youth upward by Koan Lo the first. Xie was the daughter of a slave, which will explain why she and Koan Lo the second had had the opportunity to know one another before the latter left with his cousin for America. In China, the daughters of slaves are allowed far more liberty than girls belonging to a higher class of society. Koan Lo, cooed Xie softly and happily as she recognized her lover. "Sie, my sweetest heart," returned Koan Lo II, his voice both glad and sad. He saw what a mistake had been made, that Sie believed that the man who was to be her husband was himself, Koan Lo II. And all the love that was in him awoke, and he became dizzy thinking of what might yet be. Could he explain that the Koan Lo who had purchased Sie for his bride, and to whom she was of right belonged, was his cousin and not himself? Could he deliver to the Koan Lo, who had many friends and stores, a precious values, the only friend, the only treasure he ever possessed? And was it likely that Sie would be happy eating the rice of Koan Lo I when she loved him, Koan Lo II? Sie's little fingers crept into his. She leaned against him. "I am tired. Shall we soon rest?" said she. "Yes, very soon, my Sie," he murmured, putting his arm round her. "I was so glad when my father told me that you had sent for me," she whispered. "I said, 'How good of Koan Lo to remember me all these years.' And did you not remember me, my jasmine flower?" "Why need you ask? You know that days and nights have been filled with you." "Having remembered me, why should you have dreamt that I might have forgotten you? There is a difference. You are a man, I am a woman." "You have been mine now for over 2 weeks," said Koan Lo II. "Do you still love me, Sie?" "Look into mine eyes and see," she answered. "And you are happy?" "Happy, yes, and this is the happiest day of all, because today my father obtains his freedom." "How's that, Sie?" "My Koan Lo, you know. Does not my father receive today the balance of the price you pay for me? And is not that, added to what you sent in advance, sufficient to purchase my father's freedom? My dear good father, he has worked so hard all these years. He has ever been so kind to me. How glad I am to think that through me the God of restoration has decreed that he shall no longer be a slave. Yes, I am the happiest woman in the world today." Sie kissed her husband's hand. He drew it away and hid with it his face. "Oh, dear husband," cried Sie, "you are very sick." "No, not sick," replied the miserable Koan Lo. "Sie, I must tell you that I am a very poor man, and we have got to leave this pretty house in the country and go to some city where I will have to work hard, and you will scarcely have enough to eat." "Kind, generous Koan Lo," answered Sie, "you have ruined yourself for my sake. You paid too high a price for me. Oh, unhappy Sie, who has pulled Koan Lo into the dust. Now let me be your servant, for gladly would I starve for your sake. I care for Koan Lo, not riches." And she fell on her knees before the young man, who raised her gently, saying, "Sie, I am unworthy of such devotion, and your words drive 1,000 spears into my heart. Hear my confession. I am your husband, but I am not the man who bought you. My cousin, Koan Lo I, sent for you to come from China. It was he who bargained for you and paid half the price your father asked whilst you were in Canton, and agreed to pay the balance upon sight of your face. Alas, the balance will never be paid, for I have stolen you from my cousin, who is not bound to keep to the agreement, and your father is still a slave." Sie stood motionless, overwhelmed by the sudden and terrible news. She looked at her husband bewilderingly. "Is it true, Koan Lo? Must my father remain a slave?" she asked. "It is true," replied her husband. "But we have still one another, and you say you care not for poverty, so forgive me and forget your father. I forgot all for love of you." He attempted to draw her to him, but with a pitiful cry she turned and fled. Koan Lo I sat smoking and meditating. Many moons had gone by since Koan Lo II had betrayed the trust Koan-Lo the First, and Koan-Lo the First was wondering what Koan-Lo the Second was doing and how he was living. He had little money and was unused to working hard, and with a woman to support, what will the dog do? Thought the old man. He felt injured and bitter, but toward the evening, after long smoking, his heart became softened, and he said to his pipe, well, he had a loving feeling for her, and the young, I suppose, must mate with the young. I think I could overlook his ungratefulness were he to come and seek forgiveness. Great and honored sir, the dishonored Sia bows before you and begs you to put your foot on her head. These words were uttered by a young Chinese girl of rare beauty, who had entered the room suddenly and prostrated herself before Koan-Lo the First. He looked up angrily. "Ah, see the false woman who made her father a liar!" he cried. Tears fell from the downcast eyes of Sie the kneeler. "Good sir," said she, "ere I had become a woman of your cousin, a man, we loved one another, and when we met after a long separation, we both forgot our duty. But the God of restoration works with my heart. I repented, and now am come to you to forgive myself, up to be your slave, to work for you until the flesh drops from my bones, if such be your desire, only asking that you will send to my father the balance of my purchase price, for he is too old and feeble to be a slave. Sir, you are known to be a more than just man. Oh, grant my request. 'Tis for my father's sake I plead. For many years he nourished me with trouble and care, and my heart almost breaks when I think of him. Punish me for my misdeeds, dress me in rags, and feed me on the meanest food. Only let me serve you and make myself of use to you, so that I may be worth my father's freedom." "And what of my cousin? Are you now false to him?" "No, not false to Koan-Lo, my husband, only true to my father." "And you wish me, whom you have injured, to free your father?" Sie's head dropped lower as she replied, "I wish to be your slave. I wish to pay with the labor of my hands the debt I owe you, and the debt I owe my father. For this I have left my husband." Koan-Lo the First arose, lifted Sie's chin, and with his hand, and contemplated with earnest eyes her face. "Your heart is not all bad," he observed. "Sit down and listen. I will not buy you for my slave, for in this country it is against the law to buy a woman for a slave, but I will hire you for 5 years to be my servant, and for that time you will do my bidding, and after that you will be free. Rest in peace concerning your father." "May the sun ever shine on you, most gracious master!" cried Sie. Then Koan-Lo the First pointed out to her a hallway leading to a little room, which room he said she could have for her own private use while she remained with him. Sie thanked him, and was leaving his presence when the door was burst open, and Koan-Lo the Second, looking haggard and wild, entered. He rushed up to Sie and clutched her by the shoulders. "You are mine!" he shouted. "I will kill you before you become another man's." "Cousin," said Koan-Lo the First, I wish not to have the woman to be my wife, but I claim her as my servant. She has already received her wages, her father's freedom." Koan-Lo the Second gazed bewilderingly into the faces of his wife and cousin. Then he drew up his hands and cried, "Ah, Koan-Lo, my cousin, I have been evil. Always have I envied you and carried bitter thoughts of you in my heart. Even your kindness to me in the past has provoked my ill will, and when I have seen you surrounded by friends, I have said scornfully, 'He that hath wine hath many friends,' although I well knew the people loved you for your good heart. And see, I have deceived. I took her to myself, knowing that she thought I was what I was not. I caused her to believe she was mine by all rights." "So I am yours," broke in Sie tremblingly. "So she shall be yours, when you are worthy of such a pearl, and can guard and keep her," said Koan-Lo the First. Then waving his cousin away from Sie, he continued, "This is your punishment. The God of restoration demands it. For 5 years you shall not see the face of Sie, your wife. Meanwhile, study, think, Be honest and work. Your husband comes for you today. Does the thought make you glad? Questioned Koanlo the First. Sie smiled and blushed. I shall be sorry to leave you, she replied. Be more glad than sad, said the old man. Sie, your husband is now a fine fellow. He has changed wonderfully during his years of probation. And I shall neither know nor love him, said Sie mischievously. Why, here he, my sweet one, my husband. My child, take my blessing. Be good and be happy. I go to my pipe to dream of bliss, if not to find it. With these words, Koanlo the First retired. Is he not almost as a god? Said Sie. Yes, answered her husband, drawing her onto his knee. He has been better to me than I have deserved, and you, oh, Sie, how can you care for me when you know what a bad fellow I have been? Well, said Sie contentedly, it is always our best friends who know how bad we are. Okay, that one had a cute ending. It's nice. It's a relief. The Three Souls of Asonan, Chapter 1. The sun was conquering the morning fog, dappling with gold the gray waters of San Francisco's bay, and throwing an emerald radiance over the islands around. Close to the long line of wharves lay motionless brigs and schooners, while farther off in the harbor were ships of many nations Close to the long line of wharves lay motionless brigs and schooners, while farther off in the harbor were ships of many nations riding at anchor. A fishing fleet was steering in from the open sea, scudding before the wind like a flock of seagulls. All night long had the fishers toiled in the deep. Now they were returning with the result of their labor. A young Chinese girl, watching the fleet from the beach of Fisherman's Cove, shivered at the morning air. Over her blue cotton blouse she wore no wrap, on her head no covering. All her interest was centered in one lone boat which lagged behind the rest, being heavier freighted. The fisherman was of her own race. When his boat was beached, he sprang to her side. Oh, yeah, what brings you here? He questioned low, for the curious eyes of his fellow fishermen were on her. Your mother is dying, she answered. The young man spake a few words in English to a Greek whose boat lay alongside his. The Greek answered in the same tongue. Then Fo Wang threw down his nets and, with the girl following, walked quickly along the waterfront, past the wharves, the warehouses, and the grog shops, up a zigzag hill and into the heart of Chinatown. Neither spoke until they reached their destination, a dingy 3-storied building. The young man began to ascend the stairs, the girl to follow. Fo Wang looked back and shook his head. The girl paused on the lowest step. May I not come? She pleaded. Today is for sorrow, returned Fo Wang. I would for a time forget all that belongs to the joy of life. The girl threw her sleeve over her head and backed out of the open door. What's the matter? Inquired a kind voice, and a woman laid her hand upon her shoulder. Oyam's bosom heaved. Oh, Liuchi, she cried, or Liuki, I think. The mother of Fo Wang is dying. You know what that means to me. The woman eyed her compassionately. Your father, I know, said she as she unlocked a door and led her companion into a room opening onto the street. Has long wished for an excuse to set it, not your betrothal to Fo Wang, but I am sure the lad to whom you are both sun and moon will never give him one. She offered Oyam some tea, but the girl pushed it aside. You know not Fo Wang, she replied sadly yet proudly. He will follow his conscience, though he lose the sun, the moon, and the whole world. The young woman thrust her head through the door. "The mother of Fo Wang is dead," cried she. "She was a good woman, kind and loving woman," said Liuki, as she gazed down upon the still features of her friend. The young daughter of Ah So Nan burst into fresh weeping. Her pretty face was much swollen. Ah So Nan had been well loved by her children, and the falling tears were not merely waters of ceremony. At the foot of the couch sat upon which the dead was laid, stood Fo Wang, his face stern and unmovable, his eyes solemn, yet luminous with a steadfast fire. Over his head was thrown white cloth. From morn till eve he had stood thus, contemplating the serene countenance of his mother, and vowing that nothing should be left undone which could be done to prove his filial affection, and consider to comfort her spirit in the land to which it had flown. 3 years, O mother, will I give to thee in grief. 3 years will I minister to thy 3 souls. He bowed within himself, remembering how sacred to the dead woman were the customs and observances of her own country. They were also sacred to him. Living in America, in the midst of Americans and Americanized Chinese, the family of Fo Wang, with the exception of one, had clung tenaciously to the beliefs of their forefathers. All the living must die, and dying return to the ground. The limbs and the flesh molder away below, and hidden away become the earth of the fields. But the spirit issues forth and is displayed on high in a condition of glorious brightness, quoted a yellow-robed priest, swinging an incense burner before a small candle-lighted altar. It was midnight when the mourning friends of the family of Fo Wang left the chief mourner alone with his dead mother. His sister, Fin Fan, and the girl who was his betrothed wife brushed his garments as they passed by him. The latter timidly touched his hand, an involuntary act of sympathy, but if he were conscious of that sympathy, he paid no heed to it, and his gaze never wavered from the face of the dead. Chapter 2. My girl, Moi Ding Fong is ready if Fo Wang is not, and you must marry this year, I have sworn you shall. Qian Lung walked out of the room with a determined step. He was an Americanized Chinese and had little regard for what he derided as the antiquated customs of China, save when it was to his interest to follow them. He was also a widower, desirous of marrying again, but undesirous of having 2 women of like years, one his wife, the other his daughter, under the same roof tree. Left alone, Oyam's thoughts became sorrowful, almost despairing. 6 moons had gone by since Asonan had passed away, yet the son of Asonan had not once during that time spoken one word to his betrothed wife. Occasionally she had passed him on the street, but always he had gone by with uplifted countenance, and in his eyes the beauty of piety and peace. At least, so it seemed to the girl, and the thought of marriage with him had seemed almost sacrilegious. But now it had come to this. If Fo Wang adhered to his resolve to mourn 3 years for his mother, what would become of her? She thought of old Moi Ding Fong and shuddered. It was bitter, bitter. There was a rapping at the door. A young girl lifted the latch and stepped in. It was Fin Fan, the sister of her betrothed. I have brought my embroidery work, said she. I thought we could have a little talk before sundown, and I must go away to prepare the evening meal. Ouyang, who was glad to see her visitor, brewed some fresh tea and settled down for an exchange of confidences. I am not going to abide by it, said Fin Fan at last. Wang King is obliged to return to China 2 weeks hence, and with or without Fo Wang's consent, I go with the man to whom my mother betrothed me. Without Fo Wang's consent? Echoed Ouyang. Yes, returned Fin Fan, snapping off a thread. Without my honorable brother's consent. And your mother's gone but 6 moons. William's face wore a shocked expression. Does the fallen leaf grieve because the green one remains on the tree? Queried Fin Fon. You must love Hong Hing well, murmured Ouyang, more than Fa Wang loves me. Where did we read about Hong Hing? That was in the first story. Sorry, I'm breaking up the Chinese Lily. Wasn't that one? That was Lin John. Huh. Okay, Hong Hing was the one with the wife and then the child. They couldn't. They had to fight for 10 months to get back. Okay, here we go. You must love Hong Hing well, murmured Ouyang, more than Fa Wang loves me. Nay, resented her companion. Fa Wang's love for you is as big as mine for Hong Hing. It is my brother's conscience alone that stands between him and you. You know that. He loves not me, sighed Ouyang. If he does not love you, returned Fin Fon, why, when we heard that you were unwell, did he sleeplessly pace his room night after night until the news came that you were restored to health? Why does he treasure a broken fan you have cast aside? Oh, well, smiled Ouyang. Fin Fon laughed softly. Fa Wang is not as other men, said she. His conscience is an inheritance from his great-great-grandfather. Her face became pensive as she added, It is sad to go across the sea without an elder brother's blessing. She repeated this to Liu Qi and Mai Gui Far, the widow, whom she had met on her way home. Why should you, inquired the latter, when there is a way by which to obtain it? How? Did also none leave no garments behind her, such garments as would well fit her 3 souls? And is it not always easy to delude the serious and the wise? Oh dear. I think I see where this is going. Chapter 3. Ouyang climbed the stairs to the Joss house. The desire for solitude brought her there. But when she had closed the door upon herself, she found that she was not alone. Fa Wang was there. Before the images of the 3 wise ones he stood, silent, motionless. He is communing with his mother's spirit, thought Ouyang. She beheld him through the mist of tears. Love filled her whole being. She dared not move, because she was afraid he would turn and see her, and then, of course, he would go away. She would stay near him for a few moments and then retire. The dim light of the place, the quietness in the midst of noise, the fragrance of some burning incense soothed and calmed her. It was as if all the sorrow and despair that had overwhelmed her when her father had told her to prepare for her wedding day with Moi Ding Feng had passed away. After a few moments she stepped back softly toward the door, but she was too late. Fa Wang turned and beheld her. She fluttered like a bird until she saw that, surprised by her presence, he had forgotten death and thought only of life and love. A glad, eager light shone in his eyes. He made a swift step toward her. Then he covered his face with his hands. Fa Wang, cried Ouyang, love at last overcoming superstition. Must I become the wife of Moi Ding Feng? Oh, no, he moaned. Then the girl said in desperation, take me to yourself. Fa Wang's hands fell to his side. For a moment he looked into that pleading face and wavered. A little bird flew in through an open window and perched itself upon an altar, began twittering. Fa Wang started back, the expression on his face changing. Warning from the dead, he muttered. A warning from the dead! An iron hand gripped Ouyang's heart. Life itself seemed to close upon her. Oh, thank you so much for the follow, Angel. How are you doing? We're it looks like we're about halfway through story time. It's going to run late today. Oh, and thank you for the hydration reminder. You missed me giving the kitties a treat, but there will be other story times. I am currently reading Mrs. Spring Fragrance by Sui Sin Far, who is, it is the, here, I'm going to put Maestro up. This little guy is my kitty boy Maestro, and I have this image up when I'm chatting between chapters, or, you know, at the beginning or the end. So tell me a little bit about yourself, like what you like to read and, you know, what kind of streams you like to listen to or watch. And I'll tell you a little bit about this book while I'm waiting to see if you reply in chat. So Sui Sin Far, the author of these short stories. Let's see. This is Lady Grey, one of my favorite teas. I usually cycle between Lady Grey, Earl Grey, and Jasmine green tea. And then, of course, I have my water and my Red Bull. I've actually come to understand that it's really nice to have something that's slightly sugary when you're like reading or singing a lot, and you know it can be hard on the voice, and a little bit of sugar is really nice and soothing for it. And this has just a hint of carbonation. I do know Fused tea. I don't remember if I've ever had it before. Was it pre-bottled? I think it's pre-bottled. Yeah, I'll have to look into it again. There's some bottled, I don't usually like bottled tea. Like, I do like honest tea, like the lemon and, lemon black tea. Yeah. Kind of Arnold Palmer-esque. What kind of teas do you like to drink? I'm assuming Fused tea. Ah, okay. Gotcha. That seems familiar now that you mention it, that I've seen it. I actually, my honest tea, I mix half and half because it's not sweet enough. However, I think it's a Lipton instant tea powder. The lemon instant tea powder is too sweet, so I do half and half. Ah. I think they do still sell it there. I remember I've been in Mexico a couple of times, and there my favorite drink was an apple Fanta. And they don't really have Fanta in the States like they do down there. I mean, they do have Fanta, but it definitely tastes more manufactured, I guess you could say. But I liked the stuff that I had down there, especially the apple stuff. Ooh. I do love a good apple flavor. Oh, goodness. Have I tried horchata? I think I might have tried it once. It's interesting. Oh, Jamaica. Okay. I've not tried anything from Jamaica, at least not that I'm aware of. But yeah, it seems like I've tried horchata once. And I think I was coming into it kind of expecting something a bit thicker. It seems like it's kind of got a rice milk sort of texture. Like, you know, it's not as super thick as it kind of seems like it would be. Yeah. But yeah, those are basically the drinks that I cycle between. I also like, there's Maxwell House International Coffees. I really like their what is it, French vanilla. But I don't have it with regular milk because I can be a little sensitive to milk. But I have it with oat milk, and I like oat milk because it's nice and thick. It's been a while since I've had like a cola drink. I think we have a Coca-Cola in the fridge. And I do need to drink that. But I saw, oh goodness, what was it? It looked really delicious. I think it was cream soda Dr. Pepper. Sound really tasty, which they're two of my favorites. I think they might have fused tea here. Probably doesn't taste as good as it does there, though. I'll keep an eye out for it, though. Let's see if they have it at the grocery store when I go there next. Usually I go on Monday. Yeah, is it like a specific flavor? Do they have all different kind of fused tea flavors, kind of like Fanta does? Because I know that like the Nest teas, they have usually different flavors. Like there's the raspberry and lemon. They sometimes have peach. Oh, and let me that's a little something. I need to update it because Maestro is 12 now and Snockings is 17. And they are the two kitties that are in my webcam frame. So the one right above me there, that's Maestro, and Snockings is there. And they were both here a little bit earlier. They might come, well, Snockings might come back. Maestro, he's usually sulky because he doesn't like sharing me. But it's funny because Maestro actually likes being read to. Snockings not so much. She gets a little antsy, but she loves being with me, and so sometimes she'll just perch herself right here and I'll have to crane around her to read. Do you have any pets? Oh, thank you so much for putting up the socials, Corel. So the Twitter and the Discord is where I will put up my schedule, what I'm reading next. Sometimes I'll have polls on what to read next. Like I'll have like 4 different options. And the Discord isn't as active as it used to be. I've been through some upheavals at work, a lot more responsibilities now, so I haven't been doing any of the game streams. But yeah, you can feel free to post up like pictures of pets or art or anything, and people do chat in there. And then my Goodreads, I haven't updated it in a while, but that's kind of like the books that I've read and loved. And I also put up books that I haven't loved, but just kind of like the things that I've read, just to kind of get in a little feeling of it. And I also will post up like an hour before Storytime starts, just saying, hey, Storytime starts in an hour, so you can you have enough time to get prepped and stuff, as opposed to just jumping on and being like, hey, I'm streaming, and then everybody's like, wait, what a second, what, you're streaming? Yeah. And I am on Western time, so it is currently 3:40. Sorry, 3:40. Pacific time, sorry, not Western time. So I'm going to go ahead and continue, and let's see, we're getting near the end of a story, so we can chat more then. So right here, this guy is Maestro. I have him his image up when we're chatting, so going back to reading, so he is going to disappear. Let's see, where am I? Chapter 4. It was afternoon before evening, and the fog was rolling in from the sea. Quietness reigned in the plot of ground sacred to San Francisco's Chinese dead, when Fo Wang deposited a bundle at the foot of his mother's grave and prepared for the ceremony of ministering to her 3 souls. The fragrance from a wall of fir trees nearby stole to his nostrils as he cleared the weeds and withered leaves from his parents' resting place. As he placed the bowls of rice and chicken and the vase of incense where he was accustomed to place it, he became dimly conscious of a presence or presences behind the fir wall. He sighed deeply. No doubt the shade of his parents was restless, because Fo Wang, spake a voice, low but distinct. The young man fell upon his knees. "Honored mother," he cried. "Fo Wang," repeated the voice. "Though my name is on thy lips, O Yam's is in thy heart." Conscience-stricken, Fo Wang yet retained spirit enough to gasp. "Have I not been a dutiful son? Have I not sacrificed all for thee? O mother, why then dost thou reproach me?" "I do not reproach thee," chanted 3 voices, and Fo Wang lifted his head, saw 3 figures emerge from behind the fir wall. "I do not reproach thee. Thou hast been a most dutiful son, and thy offerings at my grave and in the temple have been fully appreciated. Far from reproaching thee, I am here to say to thee that the dead have regard for the living, who faithfully mourn and minister to them, and to bid thee sacrifice no more until thou hast satisfied thine own heart by taking to wife the daughter of Qian Lung, and given to thy sister and thy sister's husband an eldest brother's blessing. Thy departed mother requires not the sacrifice of a broken heart. The fallen leaf grieves not because the green leaf still clings to the bough." Saying this, the 3 figures flapped the loose sleeves of the well-known garments of Ah Sonan and faded from his vision. For a moment, Fo Wang gazed after them as if spellbound. Then he arose and rushed toward the fir wall, behind which they seemed to have vanished. "Honored mother, honored parent, come back and tell me of the new birth," he cried. There was no response. Fo Wang returned to the grave and lighted the incense, but he did not wait to see its smoke ascend. Instead, he hastened to the house of Qian Lung and said to the girl who met him at the door, "No more shall my longing for thee take the fragrance from the flowers and the light from the sun and moon." In case you missed a little earlier in the story, that was, I believe, the betrothed, the sister, and probably the neighbor dressing in his mother's clothes and sort of not really tricking him, but kind of giving him wise words to encourage him to strike before it's too late, we shall say. I kind of like that ending. The prized China baby. The baby was the one gleam of sunshine in Fin Fan's life, and how she loved it no words can tell. When it was first born, she used to lie with her face turned to its little soft breathing mouth, and think there was nothing quite so lovely in the world as the wee pink face before her, while the touch of its tiny toes and fingers would send wonderful thrills through her whole body. Those were delightful days, but oh, how quickly they sped. A week after the birth of little Jessamine Flower, Fin Fan was busy winding tobacco leaves in the dark room behind her husband's factory. Winding tobacco leaves had been Fin Fan's occupation ever since she had become Chung Ki's wife, and hard and dreary work it was. Now, however, she did not mind it quite so much, for in a bunk which was built on one side of the room was a most precious bundle, and every now and then she would go over to that bunk and crow and coo to the baby therein. But though Fin Fan prized her child so highly, Jessamine Flower's father would rather she had not been born, and considered the baby a nuisance because she took up so much of her mother's time. He would rather that Fin Fan spent the hours in winding tobacco leaves than in nursing the baby. However, Fin Fan managed to do both, and by dint of getting up very early in the morning and retiring very late at night, made as much money for her husband after the baby was born as she ever did before. and it was well for her that that was so, as the baby would otherwise have taken from her and given to some other, more fortunate woman. Not that Fin Fan considered herself unfortunate. Oh, no. She had been a hard-working little slave all her life, and after her mistress sold her to be the wife to Chung Ki, she never dreamt of complaining, because, though a wife, she was still a slave. When Jessamine Flower was about 6 months old, one of the ladies of the mission, in making her rounds of Chinatown, ran in to see Fin Fan and her baby. "What a beautiful child!" exclaimed the lady. "And oh, how cunning!" she continued, noting the amulets on the little ankles and wrists, the tiny quilted vest and gay little trousers in which Fin Fan had arrayed her treasures. Fin Fan sat still and shyly smiled, rubbing her chin slowly against the baby's round cheek. Fin Fan was scarcely more than a child herself in years. "I want to ask you, dear little mother," said the lady, "if you will not send your little one to the Chinese baby show, which we are going to have on Christmas Eve in the Presbyterian Mission schoolroom." Fin Fan's eyes brightened. "What do you think? That my baby get a prize?" she asked hesitatingly. "I think so indeed," answered the lady, feeling the tiny, perfectly shaped limbs and peeping into the brightest of black eyes. From that day until Christmas Eve, Fin Fan thought of nothing but the baby show. She would be there with her baby, and if it won prize, why, perhaps its father might be got to regard it with more favor, so that he would not frown so blackly and mutter under his breath at the slightest cry or coo. On the morning of Christmas Eve, Chung Ki brought into Fin Fan's room a great bundle of tobacco, which he declared had to be rolled by the evening, and when it was time to start for the show, the work's not nearly finished. However, Fin Fan dressed her baby, rolled it in a shawl, and with it in her arms, stealthily left the place. It was a bright scene that greeted her upon arrival at the mission house. The little competitors, in the enclosure that had been arranged for them, presented a peculiarly gorgeous appearance. All had been carefully prepared for the beauty test, and looked as pretty as possible, though in some cases bejeweled head-dresses and voluminous silken garments almost hid the competitors. Some small figures quite blazed in golden tinsel, and then there were solemn cherubs almost free from clothing. The majority were plump and well-formed children, and there wasn't a cross or crying baby in the 45. Fin Fan's baby made the 46th, and it was immediately surrounded by a group of admiring ladies. How Fin Fan's eyes danced! Her baby would get a prize, and she would never more need to fear that her husband would give it away. That terrible dread had haunted her ever since its birth. But surely, thought the little mother, if he gets a prize he will be so proud that he will let me keep it forever. And Fin Fan's baby did get a prize, a shining gold bit, and Fin Fan, delighted and excited, started for home. She was so happy and proud. Chung Ki was very angry. Fin Fan was not in her room, and the work he had given her to do that morning was lying on the table undone. He said some hard words in a soft voice, which was his way sometimes, and then told the old woman who helped the men in the factory to be ready to carry a baby to the herb doctor's wife that night. "Tell her," said he, "that my cousin, the doctor, says that she long has desired a child, and so I send her one as a Christmas present, according to American custom." Just then came a loud knocking at the door. Chung Ki slowly unbarred it, and 2 men entered, bearing a stretcher upon which a covered form lay. "Why be you come to my store?" asked Chung Ki in broken English. The men put down their burden, and one pulled down the covering from which lay on the stretcher and revealed an unconscious woman and a dead baby. It was on Jackson Street. The woman was trying to run with a baby in her arms, and just as she reached the crossing, a butcher's cart came round the corner. Some Chinese who knows you advised me to bring them here. Your wife and child, eh? Chung Ki stared speechlessly at the still faces, an awful horror in his eyes. A curious crowd began to fill the place. A doctor was in the midst of it and elbowed his way to where Fin Fan was beginning to regain consciousness. "Move back, all of you. We want some air here," he shouted authoritatively, and Fin Fan, roused by the loud voice, feebly raised her head and, looking straight into her husband's eyes, said, "Chun-Ki's baby caught first prize. Chun-Ki let Fin Fan keep baby always." That was all. Fin Fan's eyes closed. Her head fell back beside the prize baby's, hers forever. My word, that was a dark one. Lin John. I feel like I need a spreadsheet to keep track of who is who, because they do keep referring back to others in the story. It was New Year's Eve. Lin John mused over the brightly burning fire. Through the beams of the roof the stars shone. Far away in the deep night sky they shone down upon him, and he felt their beauty, though he had no words for it. The long braid, which was wound round his head, lay lazily on. The long braid, which was wound around. The long braid, which was wound around his head, lazily uncoiled and fell down his back. His smooth young face was placid and content. Lin John was at peace with the world. Within one of his blouse sleeves lay a small bag of gold, the accumulated earnings of 3 years, and that gold was to release his only sister from a humiliating and secret bondage. A sense of duty done led him to dream of the to come. What a fortunate fellow he was to have been able to obtain profitable work, and within 3 years to have saved $400. In the next 3 years, he might be able to establish a little business and send his sister to their parents in China to live like an honest woman. The sharp edges of his life were forgotten in the drowsy warmth, and the world faded into dreamland. The latch was softly lifted. With stealthy step, a woman approached the boy and knelt beside him. By the flickering gleam of the dying fire, she found that for which she searched, and hiding it in her breast swiftly and noiselessly withdrew. Lin John rose. His spirits were light, and so were his sleeves. He reached for his bowl of rice, then set it down, and suddenly his chopsticks clattered on the floor. With hands thrust into his blouse, he felt for what was not there. Thus, with bewildered eyes for a few moments. With bewildered eyes for a few moments. Then he uttered a low cry, and his face became old and gray. A large apartment, richly carpeted, furniture of dark and vulnerable wood artistically carved, ceiling decorated with beautiful Chinese ornaments and gold incense burners, walls hung from top to bottom with long bamboo panels covered with silk, on which were printed Chinese characters, tropical plants on stands, heavy curtains draped over windows. This in the heart of Chinatown, and in the midst of these surroundings, a girl dressed this in the heart of Chinatown. And in the midst of these surroundings, a girl dressed in a robe of dark blue silk worn over a full skirt richly embroidered. The sleeves fell over hands, glittering with rings, and shoes of light silk were on her feet. Her hair was ornamented with flowers made of jewels. She wore 3 or 4 pairs of bracelets. Her jewel earrings were over an inch long. The girl was fair to see in that her face was smooth and oval, eyes long and dark, mouth small and round, hair of jetty hue, and figure petite and graceful. Hanging over a chair by her side was a sealskin saque. S-A-C-Q-U-E. Okay. Such as is worn by fashionable American women. The girl eyed it admiringly, and every few moments stroked the soft fur with caressing fingers. "Passant," she called. A curtain was pushed aside, and a heavy, broad-faced Chinese woman in blouse and trousers of black sateen stood revealed. "Look," said the beauty, "I have a cloak like an American lady's. Is it not fine?" Pao Sang nodded. "I wonder at Moi Loi," said she. "He is not in favor with the gambling cash tiger, and is losing money." "Moi Loi gave it not to me. I bought it myself." "But from whom did you obtain the money?" "If I let out a secret, will you lock it up?" Pao Sang smiled grimly, and her companion, sidling closer to her, said, "I took the money from my brother. It was my money. For years he has been working to make it for me, and last week he told me that he had saved $400 to pay to Moi Loi so that I might be free. Now, what do I want to be free for? To be poor? To have no one to buy me good dinners and pretty things? To be gay no more?" Lin John meant well, but he knows little. As to me, I wanted a sealskin sack like the fine American ladies. So 2 moons gone by, I stole away to the country and found him asleep. I did not wake him, and for the first day of the new year, I had this cloak. See? "Heaven frowns on me," said Lin John sadly, speaking to Moi Loi. "I made the money with which to redeem my sister and have lost it. I grieve, and I would have you say to her that, for her sake, I will engage myself laboriously and conform to virtue till 3 more New Years have grown old, and that though I merit blame for my carelessness, yet I am faithful unto her." And with his spade over his shoulder, he shuffled away from an upper window, of which a woman looked down and under her breath called, "Fool." That's an interesting one. Sorry, Snocking's fur. Tiang Shan's kindred spirit. Had Tiang Shan been an American and China to him a forbidden country, his daring exploits and thrilling adventures would have furnished inspiration for many a newspaper and magazine article, novel, and short story. As a hero, he would certainly have far outshone Dewey, Perry, or Cook. Being, however, Chinese and the forbidden country America, he was simply recorded by the American press as a wily Oriental who, by ways that are dark and tricks that are vain, is eluding the vigilance of our brave customs officers. As to his experiences, the only one who took any particular interest in them was Fin Fan. Fin Fan was Tian Shan's kindred spirit. She was the daughter of a Canadian Chinese storekeeper, and the object of much concern to both Protestant mission ladies and good Catholic sisters. "I like learn talk and dress like you," she would respond to attempts to bring her into the folds. But I not want think like you. Too much discuss." And when it was urged upon her that her father was a convert, the mission ladies declaring to the Protestant faith and the nuns to the Catholic, she would calmly answer, "That's so? Well, I not my father. Besides, I think my father just say he Catholic or Protestant for sake of being amiable to you. He good-natured man and want to please you." This independent and original stand led Fin Fan to live, as it were, in an atmosphere of outlawry. Yeah, there we go. Even amongst her own countrywomen, for all proper Chinese females in Canada and America, unless their husbands are men of influence in their own country, conform upon request to the religion of the woman of the white race. Fin Fan sat on her father's doorstep, amusing herself with a ball of yarn and a kitten. She was a pretty girl, with the delicate features, long slanting eyes, and pouting mouth of a woman of Suzhou, to whose province her dead mother had belonged. I don't know if this is the same Fin Fan we've read about like 2 other times before, or if this is a new Fin Fan. Tian Shan came along. "Will you come for a walk around the mountain?" asked he. "I don't know," answered Fin Fon. "Do!" he urged. The walk around the mountain is enjoyable at all seasons, but particularly so in the fall of the year, when the leaves on the trees are turning all colors, making the mount itself look like one big posy. The air was fresh, sweet, and piney. As Tian Shan and Fin Fan walked, they chatted gaily. Not so much of Tian Fan or Fin Fan, not so much of Tian Shan or Fin Fan, as of the brilliant landscape, the sun shining through a grove of black-trunked trees with golden leaves, the squirrels that whisked past them, the birds twittering and soliloquizing over their vanishing homes, and many other objects of nature. Tian Shan's roving life had made him quite a woodsman, and Fin Fan was his kindred spirit. A large oak, looking like a smoldering pyre, invited them to a seat under its boughs. After happily munching half a dozen acorns, Fin Fan requested to be told all about Tian Shan's last adventure. Every time he crossed the border, he was obliged to devise some new scheme by which to accomplish his object, and as he usually succeeded, there was always a new story to tell whenever he returned to Canada. This time he had run across the river a mile above the Lachine Rapids in an Indian war canoe, and landed in a cove surrounded by reefs, where pursuit was impossible. It had been a perilous undertaking, for he had to make his way right through the swift current of the St. Lawrence, the turbulent rapids so near that it seemed as if he must yield life to the raging cataract. But with indomitable courage he had forged ahead, the canoe, with every plunge of its paddles, rising on the swells and cutting through the whitecaps, until at last he reached the shore for which he had risked so much. Fin Fan was thoughtful for a few moments after listening to his narration. "Why," she queried at last, when you can make so much more money in the States than in Canada, do you come so often to this side and endanger your life as you do when returning?" Tian Shan was puzzled himself. He was not accustomed to analyzing the motives for his actions. Seeing that he was silent, Fin Fan went on. "I think," said she, "that it is very foolish of you to keep running backward and forward from one country to another, wasting your time and accomplishing nothing." Tian Shan dug up some soft black earth with the heels of his boots. "Perhaps it is," he observed. That night Tian Shan's relish for his supper was less keen than usual, and when he laid his head upon his pillow, instead of sleeping, he could only think of Fin Fan. Fin Fan. Her face was before him, her voice in his ears. The clock ticked Fin Fan. The cat purred. A little mouse squeaked it. A night bird sang it. He tossed about, striving to think what ailed him. With the first glimmer of morning came knowledge of his condition. He loved Fin Fan, even as the American man loves the girl he would make his wife. Now Tian Shan, unlike most Chinese, had never saved money and therefore had no home to offer Fin Fan. He knew also that her father had his eye upon a young merchant in Montreal who would make a very desirable son-in-law. In the early light of the morning, Tian Shan arose and wrote a letter. In this letter, which was written with a pointed brush on long yellow sheets of paper, he told Fin Fan that, as she thought it was foolish, she was going to relinquish the pleasure of running backward and forward across the border, for some time at least. He was possessed of a desire to save money, so that he could have a wife and a home. In a year, perhaps, he would see her again. Li Ping could hardly believe that his daughter was seriously opposed to becoming the wife of such a good-looking, prosperous young merchant as Wong Ling. He tried to bring her to reason, but instead of yielding her will to the parental, she declared that she would take a place as a domestic to some Canadian lady with whom she had become acquainted at the mission sooner than wed the man her father had chosen. Is it not Wongling a proper man? Inquired the amazed parent. Whether he is proper or improper makes no difference to me, returned Fin Fan. I will not marry him, and the law in this country is that you cannot compel me to wed against my will. Li Ping, he's gonna come up. Li Ping's good-natured face became almost pitiful as he regarded his daughter. Only a hen who was hatched a duckling and sees it take to the water for the first time could have worn such an expression. Fin Fan's heart softened. She was as fond of her father as he of her. Sidling up to him, she began stroking his sleeve in a coaxing fashion. For a little while longer I wish to stay with you, said she. Li Ping shook his head, but gave in. You must persuade her yourself, said he to Wong Ling that evening. You're in a country where the sacred laws and customs of China are as naught. So Wong Ling pressed his own suit. He was not a bad-looking fellow, and knew well also how to honey his speech. Moreover, he believed in paving his way with offerings of flowers, trinkets, sweetmeats. Fin Fan looked, listened, and accepted. Every gift that could be kept was carefully put by in a trunk, which she hoped some day to take to New York. They will help to furnish Tian Shan's home, said she. 12 moons had gone by since Tian Shan had begun to think of saving, and once again he was writing to Fin Fan. I have made and I have saved, wrote he. Shall I come for you? And by return mail came an answer which was not no. Of course, Fin Fan's heart beat high with happiness when Tian Shan walked into her father's store, but to gratify some indescribable feminine instinct, she simply nodded coolly in his direction and continued what might be called a flirtation with Wong Ling, who had that morning presented her with the first Chinese lily of the season and a box of the best preserved ginger. Tian Shan sat himself down on a box of dried mushrooms and glowered at his would-be rival, who, unconscious of the fact that he was making a third when there was needed but a two, chattered on like a running stream. Thoughtlessly and kittenishly, Fin Fan tossed a word, first to this one, and next to that one, and whilst loving with all her heart one man, showed much more favour to the other. Finally, Tian Shan rose from the mushrooms and marched over to the counter. These yours? He inquired to Wong Ling, indicating the lily and the box of ginger. Miss Fin Fan has done me the honor of accepting them, blandly replied Wong Ling. Very good, commented Tian Shan. He picked up the gifts and hurled them into the street. A scene of wild disorder followed. In the midst of it, the father of Fin Fan, who had been downtown, appeared at the door. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Oh, father, father, they are killing one another. Separate them, oh, separate them, pleaded Fin Fan. But her father's interference was not needed. Wong Ling swerved to one side and, falling, struck the iron foot of the stove. Tian Shan, seeing his rival unconscious, rushed out of the store. The moon hung in the sky like a great yellow pearl, and the night was beautiful and serene, but Fin Fan, miserable and unhappy, could not rest. All your fault, declared the voice of consciousness. Fin Fan, spoke a voice near to her. Could it be? Yes, it surely was Tian Shan. She could not refrain from a little scream. Shh, shh, bade Tian Shan. Is he dead? No, replied Fin Fan. He is very sick, but he will recover. I might have been a murderer, mused Tian Shan. As it is, I am liable to arrest and imprisonment for years. I am the cause of all the trouble, wept Fin Fan. Tian Shan patted her shoulder in an attempt at consolation, but a sudden footfall caused her to start away from him. They are hunting you, she cried. Go, go! And Tian Shan, casting upon her one long farewell look, strode with rapid steps away. Poor Fin Fon. She had indeed lost everyone, and added to that shame was the secret sorrow and remorse of her own dear heart. All the hopes and the dreams which had filled the years that was gone were now as naught, and he, around whom they had been woven, was, because of her, a fugitive from justice, even in Canada. One day she picked up an American newspaper which a customer had left on the counter, and, more as a habit than for any other reason, began spelling out the paragraph. A Chinese who has been unlawfully breathing a United States air for several years was captured last night crossing the border, a feat which he is said to have successfully accomplished more than a dozen times during the last few years. His name is Tian Shan, and there is no doubt whatever that he will be deported to China as soon as the necessary papers can be made out. Fin Fon lifted her head. Fresh air and light had come into her soul. Her eyes sparkled. In the closet behind her hung a suit of her father's clothes. Fin Fon was a tall and well-developed young woman. "You are to have company," said the guard, pausing in front of Tian Shan's cage. A boy without certificate was caught this morning by 2 of our men this side of Rouse Point. He has been unable to give an account of himself, so we are putting him in here with you. You will probably take a trip to China together." Tian Shan continued reading a Chinese paper which he had been allowed to attain. He was not at all interested in the companion thrust upon him. He would have preferred to be left alone. The face of the absent one is so much easier conjured in silence and solitude. It was a foregone conclusion that with Tian Shan, that he would never again behold Fin Fon, and with true Chinese philosophy he had begun to reject realities and accept dreams as the stuff upon which to live. Life itself was hard, bitter, and disappointing. Only dreams are joyous and smiling. One star after another had appeared into the heavens, until the heavens were patterned with twinkling lights. Through his prison bars, Tian Shan gazed solemnly upon the firmament. Someone touched his elbow. It was his fellow prisoner. So far, the boy had not intruded himself, having curled himself up in a corner of the cell and slept soundly, apparently, ever since his advent. "What do you want?" asked Tian Shan not unkindly. "To go to China with you and to be your wife," was the softly replying, "Hey, Boston, how are you doing?" "To go to China with you and to be your wife," was the softly surprising reply. "Fin Fon!" exclaimed Tian Shan. "Fin Fon!" The boy pulled off his cap. "Aye," said he, "'tis Fin Fon." "How are you doing, Boston? We're at a break between stories, so I can chat a little bit. Haven't seen you in a little while." We're finishing up Mrs. Spring Fragrance. We have this. Well, no, there we go. We have this much more to go. So getting close. That's why we're running over. And next month's schedule is going to be Fridays and Saturdays as opposed to Fridays and Sundays. And this Sunday is, we're still doing Sunday this week. Next week we're going to start the Friday and Saturday. So Fridays I'm going to be reading Orlando by Virginia Woolf. Sorry, took me a moment. Orlando by Virginia Woolf, and then continuing with Robinson Crusoe it will be on Saturdays. So yeah, I'm going to continue reading. Feel free to chat in the chat. The Sing-Song Woman. Aoi, the Chinese actress, threw herself down on the floor of her room and, propping her chin on her hands, gazed up at the narrow strip of blue sky which could be seen through her window. She seemed to have lost her usually merry spirits. For the first time since she had left her home, her thoughts were seriously with the past, and she longed with a great longing for the Chinese sea, the boats, the wet, blowing sands. She had been a fisherman's daughter, and many a spring had she watched the gathering of the fishing fleet to which her father's boat belonged. Well could she remember clapping her hands as the vessels steered out to sea for the season's work, her father amongst them, looking as bright as paint could make it, and flying a neat little flag at its stern. And well could she also remember how her mother had taught her to pray to Our Lady of Putu, goddess of sailors. One does not need to be a Christian to be religious, and Aoi's parents had carefully instructed their daughter according to their light, and it was not their fault if their daughter was a despised actress in an American Chinatown. The sounds of footsteps outside her door seemed to chase away Aoi's melancholy mood, and when a girl crossed her threshold, she was gazing amusingly into the street below, a populous thoroughfare of Chinatown. The newcomer presented a strange appearance. She was crying so hard that red paint, white powder, and carmine lip salve were all besmeared over a naturally pretty face. Aoi began to laugh. "Why, Maggie," said she, "how odd you look with the little red rivers running over your face. What is the matter?" "What is the matter?" echoed Maggie, who was a half-white girl. "The matter is that I wish that I were dead. I am to be married tonight to a Chinaman who I have never seen, and whom I can't bear. It isn't natural that I should. I always took to other men and never could put up with a Chinaman. I was born in America, and I am not Chinese in looks nor in any other way. See, my eyes are blue, and there is gold in my hair, and I love potatoes and beef, and every time I eat rice it makes me sick, and so does chopped up food. He came down about a week ago and made arrangements with Father, and now everything is fixed, and I am going away forever to live in China. I shall be a Chinese woman next year. I commenced to be one today when Father made me put the paint and powder on my face and dress in Chinese clothes. Ugh! I never want anyone to feel as I do. To think of having to marry a Chinaman. How I hate the Chinese, and the worst of it is, loving somebody else all the while." The girl burst into passionate sobs. The actress, who was evidently accustomed to hearing her compatriots reviled by the white and half-white denizens of Chinatown, laughed, a light, rippling laugh. Her eyes glinted mischievously. "Since you do not like the Chinese men," said she, "why do you give yourself to one? And if you care so much for somebody else, why do you not fly to that somebody?" Bold words for a Chinese woman to utter. But Aoi was not as other Chinese women, who all their lives have been sheltered by a husband or father's care. The half-white girl stared at her companion. "What do you mean?" she asked. "This," said Aoi. The fair head and dark head drew near together, and the two women passing the door, heard whispers and suppressed laughter. "Aoi is up to some tricks," said one. Chapter 2. "The sing-song woman! The sing-song woman!" It was a wild cry of anger and surprise. The ceremony of unveiling the bride had just been performed, and Huey Yen, the father of Migi, and his friends were in a state of great excitement, for the unveiled, brightly clothed little figure standing in the middle of the room was not the bride who was to have been, but Aoi, the actress, the sing-song woman. Every voice but one was raised. The bridegroom, a tall, handsome man, did not understand what had happened, and could find no words to express his surprise at the uproar. But he was so newly wedded that it was not until Huey Yen advanced to the bride and shook his hand threateningly in her face that he felt himself a husband. and inferred by placing himself before the girl. "What is all this?" he inquired. "What has my wife done to merit such abuse?" "Your wife!" scornfully ejaculated Hugh Yen, "is no wife of yours. You were to have married my daughter, Maggie. This is not my daughter. This is an impostor, an actress, a sing-song woman. Where is my daughter?" Aoi laughed her peculiar, rippling, amused laugh. She was in no wise abashed, and indeed appeared to be enjoying the situation. Her bright, defiant eyes met her questioner's boldly as she answered, "Maggie has gone to eat beef and potatoes with a white man. Oh, we had such a merry time making this play." "See how worthless a thing she is," said Hugh Yen to the young bridegroom. The latter regarded Aoi compassionately. He was a man, and perhaps a little tenderness crept into his heart for the girl towards whom so much bitterness was evinced. She was beautiful. He drew near to her. "Can you not justify yourself?" he asked sadly. For a moment Aoi gazed into his eyes, the only eyes that had looked with true kindness into hers for many a moon. "You justify me," she replied, with an upward pleading glance. Then Leong, the bridegroom, spoke. He said, "The daughter of Hugh Yen cared not to become my bride, and has sought her happiness with another. Aoi, having a kind heart, helped her to that happiness, and tried to recompense me my loss by giving me herself. She has been unwise and indiscreet, but the good that is in her is more than the evil, and now that she is my wife, none shall say a word against her." Aoi pulled at his sleeve. "You give me credit for what I do not deserve," said she. "I had no kind feelings. I thought only of mischief, and I am not your wife. It is but a play, like the play I shall act tomorrow." "Hush," bade Leong. "You shall act no more. I will marry you again and take you to China." Then something in Aoi's breast, which for a long time had been hard as stone, became soft and tender, and her eyes ran over with tears. "Oh, sir," said she, "it takes a heart to make a heart, and you have put one today in the bosom of the sing-song woman." That was a cute one. Oh, okay. So actually that was the last short story. I am glad we ended with that one because that was pretty cute. We're going to put my strap here. Alright, so since we're at the end of the stream, let us find somebody to raid. Does anybody have any suggestions or requests? Let's pop on over and see who's on. Oh goodness, we haven't raided print in a while. You too, Corel. If I don't see you on Sunday, I hope you have a good rest of your weekend, a good week. Yeah, Sunday is going to be, we're going to be continuing with Robinson Crusoe. And then I'll try to remember to put up a reminder on the Discord and on Twitter about the June schedule. It's so weird that May is ending. The June schedule, and we'll be starting Orlando by Virginia Woolf next. Ooh, Leah Sunshine is actually, yeah. Night Corral. We're gonna raid Leah Sunshine. She was the first person to ever raid me. So, hang on. I gotta find my keyboard. It's behind all of my drinks. Right. Oops. Sunshine only has one H. Yes. Did we get it right? We did. Yes. All right. Getting our raid message ready. All right. I'll see you next time. I hope you have a good day. Bye.